Hello everyone, and I can still see that lots of people are here even though it's already pretty late in the afternoon, so thank you so much for staying here with me, and thank you Elise for the wonderful welcome. So I'm just happy to have you all here. It's my third time here at Vuejs Amsterdam. Once said, all good things come in three, so I'm happy to share with you about that. So, I came here to ask you this question. Who are you? Or, in other words, which is more accurate, who are you? Well, I want to hint to a certain process, workflow, you name it. You did at least 2 times, I think, in these last 2 days, because I do think you acquired a ticket, you bought it, you got it gifted, and on this ticket, you have maybe your names in it, so you could come here with a QR code. And with this QR code, you got this wonderful badge with your name on it, so you don't need to be answering the question who you are like all the time. So this is actually a form of authentication. And this is the thing I want to talk with you about. Well, but when it comes to Authn or authentication, I want to dive down to the most important parts so it doesn't look that scary. At least it doesn't look that scary as it looks like for me as I started like taking care about it or basically learning it. But before that, real quick. My name is Ramona. I'm working as a developer advocate at Authn. And apart from that, maybe a few people know me for my content in testing. And even though I miss my little testing talk, this time I'm not talking about that. But when it comes to basically going to conferences, talking to people, I became a Google developer expert in web technologies, Women Techmaker ambassador, and Cypress ambassador. So I'm still passionate about testing, but today, as said, we will take care of another topic. Well, who are you? Or who are you? And I hope I won't slip when it comes to like this little pun, especially if I'm talking to Evan, because that would be really embarrassing, please. I hope it won't happen to me. But when I was thinking about how to approach an authentication talk, I stumbled upon a little short movie on not GitHub, it was YouTube. Well, who are you? That was a question which was asked inside of this little, movie actually. And it was a movie on, basically imagining you would answer those questions by using, your complete life story. And I hope you won't do that, not in the real world, but also not inside of your web application, because sometimes you need to come up with an answer on who you are, or who we are, or who they are, your users are, when it comes to, basically your own projects. So, can you answer the question on who your user is, or the user who wants to interact with your application? For this, you are using authentication. And as said, because we have a limited time frame today, I will only focus on the most important part to get you started. I'm a little sad that I needed to cut out more deeper dives, but I tried to involve some resources by a QR code, but you don't need to scan it right away because I will share my slides later on too, so don't worry. Okay, when it comes to the most important part in the topic of authentication in Vue.js, I would like to start with terms, because sometimes people mix them up. And again, this is a trap where I hope it won't happen to me in this talk, because as we said, authentication is actually a way of verifying to know, that a user or a thing is genuine, valid, or true. So in other words, basically you can verify that the person using your application or accessing the information inside of your application is who they say they are. That's basically authentication. You restrict it in this regard. However, of that is authorization, which is something else. So it's actually does the authenticated user have the permission to see or do things inside of your app? Sounds similar, is a different thing because it's more granular. And it's basically taking care of getting the permissions to do or to read or to update or delete things inside of your application. But even though these are 2 distinct words, it's still connected because for determining if a user has the right to do something, we need to know who they are, right? Again, who are they? So authentication is actually the first step to make authorization decisions. So when it comes to authentication, let's think about what it is in a little more detail. So I will basically scribble a little small, simple and traditional login flow. We will basically base it on the situation of like a traditional web app with pages which are generated on the server, maybe PHP or another language doing it. So they are distributed completely to the client. And the standard scenario is that a user visits your website on the browser, the client, so the website will send a request. I guess you already heard about that at some point. And the server handles the logic. And it's not that different when it comes to protected pages. Well, in this case, our user will enter some credentials. They will be picked up by the client, sent to the server, who is basically matching them against normally a database with these usernames and hash password in it. And if it's correct, we can proceed. So the server will send the page with the protected content and sometimes even a little cookie with it. So if the user is coming back to the application, he doesn't need to log in again. A session cookie, actually. Well, this sounds pretty easy, but why do I come to Vuejs Amsterdam and talk about such a topic which you already basically stumbled upon at some point, I guess? Well, because it's a really important one in my opinion, because, give me a second. Well, we need to be really careful when it comes to authentication because we need to keep our users secure. They trust us. And if we not take the responsible seriously and we are basically, oh, it's a really easy thing, we don't need to mind, the trust of our users into our application might wane really fast. So we want them to have a wonderful experience while we are really sure that there's a normal user accessing our application and not an attacker who wants to steal things. And this is not only my opinion. There are like some, give me a second. Okay. Some communities, especially in the open source sphere, who are seconding this opinion. For example, the Authn, or that's a open source community, whose goal is to raise security and at least security awareness inside of the World Wide Web and in web development in general. And they are basically publishing a ranking in a certain rhythm to rank the most common security risks. And as you see, broken access control, so the wrong user will get too much information, is the first place in this ranking, which highlights its importance, right? And yes, of course, I'm aware that most of, or at least a lot of those issues are authorization related. I will not mix it up in this part, hopefully. As we stated before, authentication is the first part in this process, the basis to make authorization decisions. If you screw this one up, it might be already, a bad thing. So, if you need some kind of authorization or login inside of your application, be aware of the need to build it securely. Well, it sounds a little intimidating. I was at that point too. How should I build that? Do I need to be scared? Well, not quite. But before, we need to decide on, okay, there are plenty of ways how to authenticate. Of course, we will use a simple one because we want to focus on the key aspects, but at least I want to showcase the factors you can use. Well, authentications are basically often separated into 3 factors. The first is something you know. May it be a username, a password, some information inside of your head, or these little security questions which everyone hopefully answers not with their dog's name or something. The second one is something you have. Often it's the mobile phone, it might be your debit card or a little YubiKey. Something physical, maybe on your desk or something. And last but not least, something you are. Like, especially in mobile phones, maybe a fingerprint sensor or Face ID. So, with those ways, it's easy for an application to see who you are. But I guess if I'd had a slider or some survey tool and ask you, okay, what is the first picture inside of your mind when you think about authentication? I guess it's this one. Back to the basics, basically. Key aspects are most important parts. It's actually the typical login user interface you have basically stumbled upon almost in any web application. And in this case, we will use something we know. Only one factor, so those kind of authorization processes are called single-factor authentication. But it doesn't need to be something we know, so it could be any factor actually. Remember, like, I guess Slack does that, sending you an email, something like that. Passwordless, pretty cool. Well, single-factor authentication. And to keep it straightforward and keep the time frame, let's take a look at a little demo on how to build such a single-factor authentication into Vue.js. Well, in this case, I would love to use a small Vue 3 demo, like a small Vue 3 project with Vue router in it. So we have some links, some routes to protect. And of course, we need a small backend, small database thingy. Because of the time frame, I will mock it. So I'm sorry for that. I don't like mocks, especially when it comes to being a test nerd. But in this case, I guess it's OK. And I'll use an Express server for that. Well, when it comes to the product structure, that's not really surprising too. We have a views folder with all the UI stuff with the components we need, which is a dashboard, which will be protected, a home view, which is the home page where we start, and the login view with the login form, actually. Then there's the router.js for the Vue router configuration and the routes, and the server.js for the backend mock. The routes look like that. I will just use a little snippet in it. No, it's not the routes, it's my backend mock. So standard Express server with a login route in it. I was a little fast, I think, but it's good because before we will take a look at this login route or login endpoint, we will need to have some users, right? So we can compare it to something if we enter our credentials in it. So in this case, I will have an array with I don't know, some objects, username, password, maybe a row if I will dip into authorization, but not that time, and an ID. So just a little mock, which is convenient for this example. Then we will get the actual credentials the user will enter by, of course, by the request we will given. And we will compare it with the mock we have. So far, so easy. And if we can find the user which was entered inside of the mock, we will consider it authenticated. We can send a response with the corresponding status code, which was successful, and a wonderful little message like user authenticated or anything like that. And if not, we are having wrong credentials, we cannot proceed. Yeah. And there is the root.js to see how to protect the root. It's pretty straightforward too. We will need to set require auth to true inside of the meter object of the root. And that's basically everything. We can start looking at the component like the view then. So let's open it and take a look to enter basically the way on how to access the credentials the user will enter, using the view model behind the input fields. Afterwards, we will take care of a try-catch to have at least some proper error handling because I don't want to have a too bad demo actually. And then starting to handle the request and response. So let's save it inside of a const. Then wait for the request, which is done by Axios. So a typical post where I will add our little login route. Exactly. We will add a small header and set the content type to application JSON to make it a little easier to handle the data we will get. And we will add the data in a little bit. There we go. Exactly. And if the response has some data, or we could use the status code too, I don't know why I didn't use it. Well, we will add some login failed, which helps me with some styling if it's like successful or not. And then the important part, the router will navigate us to the dashboard if we are authenticated. And if not, we will have some error handling and a wonderful console log message, I think. In a bit. I should type a little faster, I think. Yeah, we will do something pretty similar actually for the error handling too. So we will learn via console if something completely goes wrong, like we are losing the connection or something, and set login failure to true to have some appropriate styling. And of course, at first I want to test. I want to test if we can access the dashboard without logging in, and we cannot. So it's protected, wonderful. Next time I want to enter invalid credentials. Let's see, we shouldn't be able to log in. And we're not, perfect. And wonderful styling, I know, no, sorry. And if we have right credentials, like correct ones, we'll be able to open it. And I almost forgot, I put my little example. This is not done yet, there's something coming up, but you can always check it out and stack it. There's a GitHub repository too, but as said, you don't need to scan it right away. I will have it like inside of this little like corner, and I will share my slides too. Okay, so far for a traditional, pretty basic, not that much surprising authentication workflow. But well, I sometimes think about cookies, and not because I'm hungry, but because they sometimes are, especially when it comes to single-page applications, and we are in a view context, we are at a single-page applications, sometimes cookies were a little annoying, at least to me, because, well, I ran into problems. And yeah, of course, it did sound too easy, right? Especially when it comes to cross-origin resource sharing. I don't like CORS. I hope you not stumble upon problems with CORS. And if you do, if you Google, you can basically search forever because there are so many approaches on how to handle it. When it comes to cookies, we have states that are required, and we want to have a more consistent way of remembering sessions, right? So let's take a look if we can find another way on how to authenticate. And especially when it comes to security, maybe there's a more suitable way where we can be sure that like the response we get is the right one, nobody fiddled around with it. We can be really secure that the sender was really the one we expected. And there we could take a look at another alternative, which is called token-based authentication. And first things first, a token is actually a unique identifier you can fill with meaning. It's representing something which is important to you. So you can store information in it, and you can retrieve it. This is called claim. There are some kinds of tokens, like the access token, which I, for example, in my daily doing use a lot when it comes to allow application to access an API, but also refresh token to get a new session or ID ones. But for us now, we will take a look at the JSON Web Token, the JWT token in short. It looks like this a little bit. So I basically took a screenshot of JWT.io, which is a wonderful page to help you a little bit to learn about those tokens and to verify them to see if they are fine. We will create such a token in a bit and verify it so I don't screw it up, actually. It looks like this. It has a header. You can see here, I guess it's a little, it should be red in real world, actually. So this is the header where some metadata is stored, and the algorithm you will use to sign them, which is a wonderful feature. The purple one is the payload, the biggest part, and if you decode it, you will have the claims in it, the information you want to store in it, which you think the meaning you want to get out of it. May it be usernames, may it be user roles, whatever you define beforehand. And last but not least, the teal one, which is here. It's the signature. And this is something I really love about JWT token, because you can sign your tokens. You can be sure in this regard that nobody changed it on the way to you. And if, for example, a private key or something is used, you can be sure that the sender who sent it to you is the one you think, which makes it more secure. So let's change our little demo to fit that. We will need our server MOOC again, and there I will import the JWT, like the JSON Web Token you can see here as like QR code to the repo too, so I will import it, standard thing. Then I will define my secret key. Could be anything if we want to be like fitting a 30-minute time frame, like we want to do right now. Could be like one of that. And then we will generate it if we are authenticated. So let's use the sign method to create it. And then we will start with adding the claims, which might be a user ID, which we will take from the matching user, the user role, so it's taken by our database, for example, the key we want to use for signing, and some other things, for example, an option to let it expire, for example. Let's go for 1 hour in this case. And then we need to put it into the response again to make it possible to work with it. And we will make our login view react to it too. So let's do similar things. So we check if there's a token in the response, and if yes, we will be considered authenticated. Be careful. This comment is there for a reason, because for this demo, for the sake of time, I will put it into the local storage. Please take this comment into account. I don't want to spoil right now. And then we will proceed with like not making everything red, because we were able to log in, and with the navigation via the route. Okay, so it's testing time. We will see if we can log in with invalid credentials. We cannot. Let's correct that. And we can log in. And I want to take a look at the token I created. We can find it in the local storage. There it is. And I will insert it into JWT.io to see if it's working or not. And it's valid. We can find our claims in it. And we could use it now as a session. Okay. I already told you there was a little thing which I did just because of being time. It's nothing I want to advise you to, because there's a problem with the local storage. Well, because it's on, basically same origin. It is not effective when it comes to using local storage for cross-site scripting protection. As same origin, everything runs on the same origin, even the JavaScript of the attacker, which makes it easy for a possible attacker to access your token, to retrieve the secret, and to fiddle around with it. So consider some alternative, for example, HTTP-only cookies, even though they can be a little annoying when it comes to single-page applications. Utilizing your web workers, for example, or in-memory storage. However, I'm so sad that we don't have the time for that, so I added a little QR code for more information if you're interested in it. Or maybe I should write a little blog post about it and let you know via social media or something. So just just use the local storage if you really need to, and consider other choices. Okay, this didn't look too difficult, right? But still, if you're not feeling comfortable in writing such a sensitive workflow by yourself, or you want to use other factors for authentication, I can understand to say, I don't want to build it all by myself. Especially, there are more ways to either be more secure when it comes to authentication, or more convenient, because, well, when it comes to remembering passwords, not all users are using password managers, unfortunately. So let's see how we can make it easier for them or for us. So there are ways like multi-factor authentication, using more than just one factor, or even all three. Or you could use password less authentication possibilities, like the email I mentioned before, or even passkeys. And I'm a fan of YubiKeys, but like you shouldn't lose them at all, or have two ones. Well, you don't need to build them completely by yourself, or let me at least hand you to some resources where you can find out more on this authentication topic and the other factors. So there's a dev center at the Auth0 resources where you can find basically everything Auth0 related, of course, but you don't need to decide for that. So there's lots of information on authentication in Vue.js, which is kind of agnostic, so that's pretty good. But like, I need to come up with a little shout out. If you don't want to build it completely on your own, we could take a look at like the Vue SDK of Auth0, because they are handling that for you. And there's a free plan. If you want to try it, there's the QR code, but you can look it up in my slide later on too. Okay, going back to this little short movie I mentioned. It was from 2019. I guess it was barely 11 minutes long, and it was I guess it was directed by Julio Pod. His name? Yeah. And the answer he gave, or like the main character get, is that it's not that important to give an answer because it's interesting that the future might hold, which is not really a learning I want to apply to authentication, because it's still important to answer this in a valid answer, in a short answer, and in a secure one. So, well, the process or action of proving or showing something to be true, genuine, or valid, so that we can validate user and can be really sure about that they are who they are, is easy to answer in Vue. But if you want to add more features, or you feel like it's still a little complicated, or you don't want to have the responsibility for it, there are libraries, open source tools, products. You can take a look at them. So we are really sure that we know who our users are. It is you. You are wonderful, and that's cool. So, if there are four things to remember from this talk, it's those. A secure authentication process is crucial because it's it's the #1 threat when it comes to OWASP. Authentication is not the same as authorization, but like they build onto another. So authentication is the first step for authorization decisions. There are 3 factors to remember, like something you know, something you have, and something you see. And it's nothing you need to be worried when it comes to complexity, but you can use libraries or tools too. So yeah, this is actually all from my talk. If you got questions, I'll be here somewhere around the conference, but you can find me under my handle leicht-eckig at basically all known platforms. So please don't be shy to reach out. And again, I'm so happy to basically share my third Vuejs Amsterdam with you guys. All good things come in 3, so you are wonderful. Thank you so much for listening.